Well, this is Reg Hart speaking to you from my home in Toronto, and I opened this video with a shot of a full-sized authorized replica of the Shroud of Turin. A few years ago I saw a documentary on YouTube, a BBC documentary on the Shroud of Turin. I'd seen an earlier one by the same man, David Rolfe, called The Silent Witness. And later I saw one of those terrible made-for-television hysterical documentaries. And I thought, I want a copy of that. And right away I thought, that's crazy, you know, what's that going to do? But I have a rule: if I tell myself it's something crazy, then I start exploring it, because crazy is where the exciting stuff is. And I could buy a knockoff for $150, or I could buy an authorized reproduction for considerably more. And I contacted Barry Schwartz, who was raised as an Orthodox Jew and walked away from his faith because of reasons. He's the best one to listen to for that. Who became a photographer. He did some work for NASA, National Aeronautic Space Administration Program. And he was asked if he would come to Italy and photo document a study on the Shroud of Turin that some NASA scientists were putting together for reasons they're best to hear from. And Barry said, "Why me?" And I'm a Jew. And the man who invited him to go said, "Well, so am I. So is the man in the cloth. Think of the science." And the science of the Shroud of Turin is astounding. And after I got the replica, I bought every book and DVD, video that I could get my hands on. More importantly, I have this in my hall, as you saw, and every day I see it. And the quiet message of the Shroud of Turin is one I'm not going to deliver in this video. I am going to talk to you about trusting in the power of the man on the cloth. Now, we're told that if we have the Spirit with us, we'll see signs that in fact the Spirit is with us. And one of the most dramatic signs I saw of this was back in the 1980s when I was walking up the street with a dog that I had raised from a pup. I called him Reefer. He was part lab, part shepherd, part collie. And I had trained him to walk without a lead. He was free. I only put him on a lead when I was around people, and the lead was to protect him from the people, because if people do something stupid and your dog reacts, as long as they're on a lead, the dog is protected. If they're not, you have to put them down. So I only put him on leads when he was around people. And we were walking up the street, and all of a sudden 2 dogs came charging across the road through the traffic towards us. They got halfway across, and then they realized what they had done was something that they shouldn't have done, and they stopped and turned to go back. And the smaller of the 2 dogs got run over by the front and rear wheels of a car. Both wheels went right over him. I thought he would have been killed, but he wasn't. And he got up and he went and hid behind some wood leaning against that house. So I crossed the street with my guy and asked him to sit, and he did. And then I went to the dog that got run over, and I gave him the back of my hand like this. I moved towards him slowly, and he snapped his jaws shut at me and barked and barked and barked. And I said softly, "It's okay, it's okay, it's okay." And the closer I moved his hands to him, the fiercer he snapped. And finally, he snapped his jaw shut on my hand. And I said, "It's okay." And he looked at me in awe. And then he quieted down completely, let go. And there was just the slightest dent, and I can still see it, in this finger, marking where his jaws. I thought the whole hand would be bloody, to tell you the truth. But it wasn't. And I was amazed at how much self-control a small dog like that, run over by the front and rear wheels of a car, had. And his owner came out, and I told her what had happened to the dog, and she took care of him. And in that moment, I had a revelation and a new understanding of the power of the man on the cloth. We're living in a world which is angry, justifiably angry, hurt, wronged, beaten. The great Sioux shaman, Crazy Horse, had a vision in the Black Hills of the future. He said that we were going to have terrible fires all over the world, and men would be brutal to women everywhere, and that God was coming to judge the world. This is Crazy Horse, a Sioux Indian, and a great man. And God is coming to judge this world. And many who think they're going to find themselves not there will find themselves welcomed by the judge. And many who think that they will be welcomed by that judge will hear, go away, I never knew you. And that's not my problem. I see tons of documentaries and videos about people going on about the authenticity of the shroud. I see tons of videos of people, so-called preachers of the word, and I haven't got time for those people, you know. But I do have time for those who've been hurt. I adopted a cat a few years ago because one of my cats had died, and this cat was the mirror image of him, but bigger. And he got here, and I looked forward to getting him, and he arrived, and he had been hurt. And he bit, clawed, hissed, scratched, ready to kill. His fur was all matted. I took him to a groomer. She said, I only met one cat I couldn't groom. I leave him with her. I come home, the phone rings. She said, well, I met the second one. So I brought him home. She suggested I have him sedated and give him what they call a lion cut, which is where they shave him. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. That'll be too traumatic for him. So I looked up on the web how to groom a cat and got all the supplies and quietly, patiently groomed his fur myself, every moment knowing, if he could, he'd kill me. And my hand puffed up from his bite. I had to get medication. And the third time he bit me was at the bottom of the stairs in my home, and I said to him, it's okay. And he looked at me, puzzled for a second, and then there was a complete transformation. And from that moment, he spent every second of his life as near to me as possible, just staring at me with love in his eyes. Head bumps galore. As I said, we're living in a world that has been traumatized. All you got to do is just take a look, People are being hurt everywhere. Meister Eckhart, a medieval thinker, said, we have the seed of God in us. Hazel seeds grow hazel trees. Pear seeds grow pear trees. God seeds grow gods. And this is the much ignored truth of Jesus, what he taught. John's Gospel opens with the famous words, in the beginning was darkness and then came the light. But the key to everything is in verses 12 to 13. I think those are the right verses, where it's written, to those who receive him, even to those who receive his name, he gives the power to become the begotten children of God. And our birth is not by flesh nor blood, nor by the will nor power of man, but by God. Now the slaves were the first to embrace Jesus. They were the lowest of the low. And some folks say that Christianity never addressed slavery. Well, it did, but it did in the quiet way that Jesus did everything that he did. The apostles reminded the slave masters that they themselves were the slaves of God, and that they would be answerable to God. for the way they treated the people below them. If the early apostles, the first apostles, fathers of the church, had advocated against slavery, they would have met the fate that many of them met anyway, which was death, much earlier, because they would have been preaching rebellion against the empire. And those who preached rebellion against the empire, unless they were Roman citizens, were crucified. And when they came to crucify Peter, he said, "I don't deserve to be crucified right side up. Please crucify me upside down." That's what we're told. And when they came to Paul, because he was a Roman citizen, Roman citizens couldn't be crucified, so they cut off his head. But those men never died. The power of their words, the power of the ideas they expressed, and the physical demonstration in their lives of their commitment to those ideas lives with us still. And you're going to meet many who will tell you that God doesn't exist and all that stuff, and there's been no shortage of those people, but the fact of the matter is that God does exist, and let them rail against his existence as much as they want. In the Gospels we read the word Father for the word Abba, which is the name by which Jesus addressed God, and Abba is the child's word for God. So the proper translation of Abba is Papa, or Daddy. Papa. The Pope is Latin for Papa, you see. You have to know the meaning of words to understand them, and the meaning of these words is something lost in time. But I'll never forget the look on that dog's face when I allowed him to bite me. The look of peace when he discovered I could be trusted. I'll never forget the look on Zorro's face, my cat Zorro's face, when he found a home. He died a few years ago, a couple of years ago, 2021, September. Broke my heart when he passed. But he passed happy, and that's what matters. I don't preach in the conventional sense of preaching. Most people who preach, I don't want to listen to. I can't listen to, actually. I mean, give them a few moments. And people will tell you that that little part at the end of Mark's Gospel, where these are the signs I recognize power is with you, that was added later on, and as a result many ignore it. I don't ignore it at all. We're told that we shall handle venomous serpents, poisonous snakes. Well, poisonous snakes are liars and murderers, people who spout poison. And I've been handling poisonous snakes for an awful long time, since the age of 6. I've been handling poisonous snakes. That's true, we have that power to handle this stuff. So we're told that those who trust in the power of God, in the words of the Gospels, the words of Jesus, and Jesus was a dirt-poor tradesman. The word in the Greek is tekton, which could be carpenter, could be stonemason. Some people say one, some people say the other. Satan is the divider. He comes in and divides people so they start arguing with each other about things that really don't matter. But he teaches that those who trust in God are like a man who built his house on rock. And the storm came and beat against that house, and it stood. And those who deny God are like a man who builds his house on sand, and the storm came and beat against that house, and it was swept away. Now, the important thing to note here is that the storm is coming, so we want our foundation to be on rock. Now, we live in a world where people are increasingly angry. There are stories in the media about anger on the streets, fury on the streets. I went out and sat on my front porch, and a man walked by, and a woman came up from behind him real fast and shoved him, like that. Luckily, there was a truck there, and that broke his fall. Otherwise, he would have fallen on the street. And she started screaming at him, and he did his best to recover himself and moved on. That woman was angry, not at him, but at someone for certain, and she took her anger out on the innocent. That's usually who winds up getting the anger taken out on them, the innocent. But these are troubled people. They've been harmed. They've been run over, just like that dog was run over. And they need love, and they need understanding, and they need the power of God, the power of Jesus, the power of you and I that we have through Jesus to change them for the better, just like my cat was and that dog was. So I've seen that power. This is the difference between myself and a lot of those people we see preaching, at least that I see preaching, is I don't get this feeling that they're really trusting in that power. Now, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says, call no one teacher, let no one call you teacher. Well, how are we going to learn if we call no one teacher? Well, I thought that's going to be interesting. So let's see. Let's see what happens here, because I'm not going to call anyone teacher. And I'm telling you right now that you may be impressed with what I'm saying here, but please don't call me your teacher. Be your own teacher. Let no one call you teacher. If all these people who are teaching were really paying attention to the word of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount and took it to heart, they wouldn't be putting themselves up as teachers. We wouldn't have Christian schools, colleges, and universities. I was told in high school I had the wrong attitude my last year at grade 13. And if I left school that day, I'd starve in 2 weeks. And the principal said, I haven't given you permission to leave. Where do you think you're going? I said, to see if you're right. And I walked out of high school around 18. No prospects. This is up in the cold north of Ontario, Sault Ste. Marie. And I arrived in Toronto that night with just enough money to buy a beer. I thought I had a friend here, discovered I didn't. Now, so I've been in the worst place you could possibly be, more than once, to tell you the truth. And I'm watching the power manifest around me, because I'm trusting in it. And I'm only saying this because this is what you're called to do too. Do away with teachers. Stop looking for teachers. Do what we're called to do from the Sermon on the Mount. Call no one teacher, let no one call you teacher. That's hard to do, but it's not as hard to do as it was for Jesus to endure what he did on the cross. And the Shroud of Turin documents that. And people can tell you it's a fake. Let them tell you that. Barry Schwartz and his team did a huge array of scientific tests on that. Barry told me that when they walked in, they thought they'd give it 5 minutes, walk out laughing. Instead, most of them have given or are giving the rest of their lives for a better understanding of it. They discovered that that image was created by no means known to man. People have conjured up images they claim are like the image there, but they're not. A friend of mine created the Museum for Textiles for Canada, and he said there's only one voice in textiles we do not argue with, and that is Mechtilde Fleury Lemberg. And Mechtilde Fleury Lemberg was given the job of restoring the Turin Shroud, and she examined it closer than any of us have ever examined it. And she says, no, it dates from the time of Jesus. So you can't argue. You can argue with her if you want, but you're arguing in vain. It is. I am Reg Hart in Toronto. When the storm comes, your house is built on rock. Go sit on your veranda and watch it. It's already here. It's a magnificent storm. We're never going to see one like it because it's the storm to end all storms. Enjoy it. It will pass.